No, or was that Wednesday? It was Wednesday, wasn't it? All right, let's just review it real quick, just to kind of refresh our memory as to where we are. Somebody tell me who the two sides were in the Chinese Civil War. The communists and the nationalists. Who was the leader first of the nationalists? Chiang Kai-shek. And then the leader of the communists? Mao Zedong, or simply Mao, as he's commonly known as Mao. Which side won? The communists. What happened to the nationalists and Chiang Kai-shek? They fled to Taiwan, and Taiwan became its own nation to this day. It's the losing side in the Chinese Civil War. Okay, so China becomes communist, which, if you want to look at it from an American point of view, that would have been perceived, and it was in the United States, as a huge setback. Okay, as a loss in the Cold War, right? A huge, important, populous nation became communist. Thank you. They're going to laugh later today as we... What's today's date? So I haven't said his name yet. Should I say it?
Yes.
On camera here?
Yes.
What's Boosie? He's not on camera. Be careful. I'm recording. I'm recording your 10,000th write-up.
Every day you gotta do me like that.
Okay, I'll stop. You're right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Okay, so... Yeah, the homework. All right. Where were we? China becomes communist. So this is from an American perspective, it's a huge setback in the Cold War, right? Because the United States is trying to prevent the spread of communism around the world. In the case of China, as early as 1949, which is when this happened, it's an epic failure to prevent the spread of communism into a big important country in Asia. All right, so what we're going to do today is turn our attention to begin looking at two other important areas of the Cold War in Asia, right? Because the Cold War is a global phenomenon. It's not just in Europe, okay? So you have the Cold War divide as depicted in the European map. Communist East, non-communist West. Germany divided in two, the Berlin Wall dividing Berlin with a literal wall between the two. That basic setup is not just true for Europe, it's true for the rest of the world in a way. The whole world is going to be divided into two camps, one that supports the communists in the Soviet Union and one supporting the United States and democracy and capitalism. So you've got the European split, but it's also global. So we're going to turn and look at how this works, first in Korea and then in Vietnam. So to begin with, the Korean War. By the way, let's go back, actually. We have a global map. Here we go. So on a map of the world, I hope you should from having done maps all year long, that Korea, the Korean Peninsula, is right here, right? Right near China and Japan. And in fact, Korea had been a colony of Japan for many years prior to World War II. Okay, the Korean Peninsula was colonized by the Japanese. It was a part of their empire. Of course, World War II happens, and Japan is defeated, as you know. So at the end of World War II, with Japan having been defeated, the Korean Peninsula, which is this piece of land jutting out into here, that we zoom up, looks like this. The Korean Peninsula will be temporarily divided along the 38th parallel. You know where the 38th parallel is, having done the map. Right, it's one of the parallel lines around the globe. Right here is the 38th parallel. This divides the Korean Peninsula into north and south. And it was meant to be temporary. So the arrangement was that the Korean Peninsula was occupied by the Soviet Union and its army, the Red Army, and the United States and its army in the south. So the Soviet Red Army in the north, the United States Army in the south, as a temporary arrangement, similar to what you saw in Germany, right? Right after the end of World War II, Germany was occupied by the communists in the east and the allies in the west. They just happened to be there when the fighting stopped. So that was the arrangement that was made in Germany. It basically became permanent, and that's something like what you're going to see in Korea as well, where the temporary arrangement becomes a permanent one over time. But they thought or hoped that this divided Korea would be temporary. Russians in the north, Americans in the south. One of the things that's going to happen going forward for Korea, in terms of finding a permanent solution, is that Korea needed to get a new government, basically. That was a task that needed to be completed. In other words, they had to write a constitution, right? They had to have elections, they had to write laws, they had to choose who the government officials would be, right? They had to set up a nation, basically, or a government. For the Americans, that means elections, right? Because that's how they perceive these things, is that there ought to be elections so that the Korean people can choose for themselves what kind of government they're going to have. So naturally, they need to have elections. Of course, we understand, I hope, that the communists in the north have no interest in that. Okay, they are not willing to allow elections in North Korea, and they actively block it. So what ends up happening is they only have elections in the southern part of Korea, which means you have the beginning of a split to where two countries are going to be created. So in May of 1948, elections are held in South Korea. May 1948. Well, you can't see that at all. That's useless. Okay, I'll stop doing that. May 1948, elections in South Korea. Not in North, because the communists won't allow it. Only in the South. And with these elections, they created a government. Okay, South Korea established a government, a democratic government, called the Republic of Korea. Okay, that's the formal name of the government in South Korea, the Republic of Korea. Sometimes shortened to ROK, the Republic of Korea. South Korea, in other words, is what we commonly call it, but the formal name is the Republic of Korea. And it is a democratic nation. It's friendly with the United States. It's non-communist. Okay. Just a few months later, in September of that same year, in September of 1948, the Soviets pushed the North Korean communists to create their own country, which they do. September of 1948, the North Korean communists establish a separate nation called the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I'll write on the board for you. So we've got ROK, Republic of Korea. Okay, that's South Korea in 1948. South Korea. And then you've got the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The DPRK. The ROK in the south and the DPRK in the north. Okay? South Korea, Democratic Capitalist, allies with the United States. North Korea, the DPRK, communist allies, to say the least, with the Soviet Union and China. Right? Because China's communist. Well, will become China. Will become communist really soon, because this is 1948. Yep. No, I'm glad you noticed that. That's exactly right. North Korea, the DPRK, is in no way, shape, or form democratic, nor is it a republic. This is something that communists do worldwide. They do it in Russia as well. It's a form of propaganda. It's a form of lies to manipulate. It's striking. I mean, you think about what the Soviet Union stands for. What the USSR stands for, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Do you know what a republic is? What is a republic? Sure. It's a type of government, a republic. It's a representative democracy. That's what a republic is. Okay, it's a representative democracy. So likewise, the Soviet Union, the USSR, does the same thing. They have these weird kind of exactly the opposite of what's true kind of labels. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, because they're not republics. No communist country is. Okay, so that's the divide then, and it's formalized, right? It's sort of set into stone. Right after World War II, it's meant to be temporary, but within a few years, that temporary divide becomes a permanent divide. Should sound familiar, just like Germany, right, with two separate nations. By the way, North Korea will be led by a dictator, a man named Kim Il-sung. You know your North Korean dictators? The son of Kim Il-sung will be a man named Kim Jong-il. And then the grandson of Kim Il-sung is Kim Jong-un, the current dictator of North Korea. You may have seen him on the news. They're all psychopathic killers in the family. Yeah, I think it was Kim Jong-un. But they're murderous tyrants, all of them. So. Who knows? Yeah, they know. We don't trust him. That's right. That's right. It's a totalitarian state. If you step out of line, right, bullet in the back of the head. This is how communist dictatorships work. Yeah, it's a prison state. Yeah, it is. It's terrible. North Korea is the worst place in the world, literally, right now. Maybe right up there with Venezuela, but yeah, it's absolutely brutal. It's a nightmare. Venezuela's bad too, but it's not new. None of this is new. This is the thing. It's very old. It's kind of what you're learning here is how it came to be. So both governments, you got two separate governments. Here's the thing, and here's where you see the setup for war. Both governments claim to be the legitimate government of Korea, of all of Korea, not just their part, right? The Republic of Korea, the government that's set up in South Korea, they say we're the legitimate government of the entire Korean peninsula. That government that they set up, that communist government they set up in the north, is illegitimate. It's not the real government. And the flip side is true as well. The DPRK, the communists in the north, claim to be the one true legitimate government for all of the Korean peninsula. Okay? That's a setup for war, which is what's going to happen next. Okay, so, war. June 25th, 1950. June 25th, 1950. My hair's sticking up. Come on now, Mr. Havens, get it together. I'm going to have to actually take care of myself in the morning now that I'm going to be on camera. I don't mind looking like a mess for you guys, but... Okay, June 25th, 1950. You've got this setup that's gonna boil over into war. On June 25th, 1950, the North Koreans swept across the 38th parallel. Is that written on your sheet? It is, isn't it? The sentence. Okay. They evaded, right? Swept across the 38th parallel into South Korea in a surprise invasion. So on the map that you see up here on the screen, this is the red. You know that red is kind of the color that's associated with communism traditionally. So on this map as well, these red arrows illustrate, stand in for that initial invasion. It's a massive one, right? They're kind of indicating that it's all across the peninsula. They come sweeping down across the 38th parallel into South